Are we experience reality itself or the brain interpretation of reality?
We don't experience reality in a completely raw, unfiltered way. Our brain takes information from our senses and constructs the experience we call reality. Light reaches our eyes, vibrations reach our ears, chemicals reach our nose and tongue, and signals come from our body. But the brain turns those signals into color, sound, taste, touch, movement, and meaning. Memory, emotion, attention, and expectation also influence what we notice. So, two people can be standing in exactly the same place and experience the same event very differently. But there's an important distinction. This doesn't mean the outside world isn't real. It means we experience that world through the brain's interpretation of it. And this is where your crossroads idea becomes interesting. If we only ever experience our own interpretation, then we have to be humble about what we think we know. Looking at something from another perspective can reveal parts of reality that our first perspective missed. So, my deepest answer is we're experiencing a brain mediated version of reality, not reality completely untouched by interpretation. And that leads to an even bigger question. If the brain is constructing our experience of reality, what is the consciousness experiencing that construction? That's where the mystery becomes much deeper.
If our thoughts and emotions and our memories consistently change, what is the part of us that notices them?
That's one of the deepest questions we can ask about consciousness, because if you watch closely, your thoughts change, your emotions change, your memories change, and even your sense of identity can change. Yet you can notice those changes happening. You might think, I'm angry. Then later, I'm calm. You can remember being angry and observe that the feeling is no longer there. So there seems to be a distinction between the experience and the awareness of the experience. But here's where we have to be careful. We don't actually know that there's a separate permanent observer inside the brain. Neuroscience can show us many processes involved in attention, self-awareness, and monitoring, but it hasn't discovered a little independent consciousness sitting somewhere inside us. Some spiritual traditions interpret that observing awareness as the higher self, soul, or divine consciousness. That's a meaningful interpretation, but it isn't scientifically established. There's also a psychological explanation. The brain can create a form of metacognition. Essentially, it can represent and monitor its own thoughts and states. So one part of the brain's activity can become aware of another part. And yet that still leaves the really difficult question unanswered. Why does any of this monitoring feel like something from the inside? Why isn't the brain simply processing information without there being an experience of being the one who is noticing? My conclusion is that I wouldn't tell you we've discovered a separate spiritual self. We haven't. But I also wouldn't dismiss the mystery. The fact that you can sit quietly and notice a thought arise, notice it change, and eventually disappear means consciousness has this extraordinary capacity to turn its attention back toward itself. And perhaps that's one of the most remarkable things about being human. The mind isn't only capable of experiencing the world, it can become curious about the experiencer.
And if consciousness is the thing experienced in the universe, what does that tell us about what reality really are?
If consciousness is the thing through which the universe is being experienced, then it tells us something profound. But we have to be careful not to turn that into a claim that consciousness creates the entire universe. At the very least, it tells us that reality has two sides to our investigation. There's the reality we can measure from the outside: matter, energy, space, time, brains, and physical processes. And then there's the reality we encounter from the inside: color, pain, love, memory, wonder, thought, and the feeling of being here. Science is extraordinarily good at describing the first side, but we still don't have a complete explanation for why physical processes are accompanied by subjective experience at all. And that's where your question becomes enormous. If consciousness is fundamental in some way, then perhaps our usual picture of reality, a universe made entirely of external physical objects, is incomplete. But there are other possibilities. Consciousness might emerge from sufficiently complex biological systems. It might be a property of particular kinds of information processing. Or there may be something about consciousness that our current scientific concepts simply haven't captured yet. We don't know which is correct. My conclusion is this: the fact that the universe can contain beings who don't merely exist but can experience existence and ask what reality is means our picture of reality is not finished. You don't have to decide that we're divine beings or that there's a cosmic consciousness behind everything. The honest mystery is already extraordinary enough. The universe contains something that can look back at the universe and ask, what am I? And that's where I'd leave the first three questions, because now we're ready for the fourth one, the conclusion that brings all three together.
So after you looked at all those three questions and you looked at every single angle, what do you actually think?
After looking at all three questions together, from neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and the limits of what we actually know, my conclusion is this: I think the deepest truth is that we are living inside an experience of reality that we don't yet fully understand. Our brains clearly shape the world we experience. Our thoughts, emotions, and memories are constantly changing, yet consciousness can notice those changes. And somehow, this physical universe contains beings capable of experiencing it and questioning what it means to exist. Could consciousness ultimately be something deeper than the brain? Possibly. I think that's a legitimate question. But I wouldn't tell you we've proved that consciousness is a divine or universal force, because we haven't. What I find more profound is that we don't actually need to solve that mystery before recognizing how extraordinary it is. We are matter that can wonder about matter. We are part of the universe that can look back at the universe. And perhaps your North Star and Crossroads idea fits here. Don't stand permanently on one road. Look inward. Look outward. Look at the opposite perspective. Look at science. Look at philosophy. Look at spiritual traditions. Then come back and ask what remains true across all those perspectives. My deepest conclusion is, don't be afraid of the unknown, and don't fill the unknown with certainty just because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Stay curious, because perhaps consciousness isn't waiting for us to discover one final answer.